Okay, so again, with recommended related texts, like it could be anything. I think you've got to think about related text in a slightly different way. It's a related text in terms of how it relates to the module, to the common module. It doesn't necessarily have to relate to 1984, although you might find that helpful, and an assessment task might require that kind of comparison. But if it's not asking you to compare it, it just wants another example of a text that explores a certain human experience. So you can think about it that way as well. In terms of examples, I mean, yeah, I'm always hesitant to just like give off a couple because then everyone does those two, and it's not that unique. You should just find another text that you like or enjoy. Make sure it's not the same form as we described. I like to go for poems. I'll give you a good one actually. I believe the poem's called Ozymandias. Look at this. That's how long the related text is. Well, that's an easy one to read, but it's a poem, and people often take poetry for granted. Some people actually do admit that poetry is really complicated. There's a lot in it. You have to really break down every word, every line. You have to look at the whole thing, the style, the voice. But read that. That's an interesting story about someone who's tried to preserve their legacy. They were such an impactful figure in their life, but they've become this statue, right, that's slowly withering away. And the idea is that no matter how impactful you are as a person, eventually the world is going to forget you. Which is, might sound grim, but it's also kind of liberating. But the point here is that you can't sustain a legacy forever. But if you really zoom into each part of that poem, there's a lot of great stuff to relate to: emotions, motivations, like the motivation to preserve your legacy over time, right? Or a contradiction or an inconsistency, right? Well, that motivation to preserve your legacy over time is inconsistent with the transience of matter in the world, right? Like everything decays. So you can't stay, and it's also inconsistent with the transience of human life. You want to preserve your legacy forever, but you're only going to live for a certain amount of time, and people are going to forget.